Welcome viewers. Today we're going to take a look at using sub-dialogues in forms. Was a request from one of the viewers of my channel. He said that sub-dialogues are very important and he wanted to know more about them. So we're going to take a look at sub-dialogues in Decisions. Before we begin, there's a couple things I want to talk about. So Decisions is hosting a Decisions Days where if you are a Decisions enthusiast and you like the product and you like learning about the tool, there's going to be a fun event where you can attend, where you can meet customers, you can meet fellow decisionites who will talk about the product, that you can pick their brain and find out more about the tool. So that's on the decisions.com website. Feel free to look on that website to find this register event. You can find it up top here where you can click the register now, and you can then get access to reserving your spot. It's between October 4th through the 6th, and I know I'll be there because I love the tool, so I hope to see you there. All right, with that out of the way, let's talk about sub-dialogues. So sub-dialogues, there's a very good document on the Decisions website. I'm going to switch to version 7 because that's what I'm using. Let's write sub-dialogue. There's a really good article on sub-dialogue data flows in here. So if you ever need a refresher on it, if my video doesn't provide enough information, you can definitely go to this article on the website, and this will give you more detail about it. But that's where you can find that on Decisions, documentation.decisions.com, and I'm using the version 7 webpage. All right, so let's go back into my environment. Let's actually play around with it. So sub-dialogues. So I'm going to create a form. It's a very simple form, and it's going to have just an advanced data grid. This advanced data grid is going to be sourced from the account type. So the Decisions default account type that is available in all of the Decisions environments. And then in the report for the advanced data grid, because that's what it uses, I just have the email address created on and created by as values that I can put in here. So now the next thing I'm going to do is let's configure a way to have a text box where I can type in a value here, and then it will filter out the data grid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, let's call this the filtered string. Now there's a couple ways you can do this. You don't need a sub-dialog flow to filter a string based on a text box submission. You can do that with active form flows if you want, but I'm not going to talk about that because I've already have another YouTube video over active form flows that goes into that feature of the product in detail. So just reference that. I'll put a link to that in the description if you want to go watch that. So, but let's say I want to use a sub-dialog. So what is the difference between a sub-dialog and a active form flow? Well, the difference between the active form flow and the sub-dialog is in data flows or active form flows, you cannot add forms inside of them. They are only to be used to get data from one form component to another. So things like forms you can't use inside of the active form flow or in the data flows that Decisions used to use in version 6. So what that means is in order to extend your form experience where I want to display a form on top of a form, I would use a sub-dialog, because a sub-dialog flow allows me to say, hey, let me add this feature and this form that when a user clicks a button, that's going to display another form where they can filter out and choose the data that they want. So let's go ahead and configure a sub-dialog now that we've talked about it for a little bit. It's called sub-dialog button. You can trigger it from a link, you can trigger it from an image, you can do it however way you want. You can use, there's two types in version 7, as the document talks about. You can use the legacy way, which uses a data flow in a form, or you can use the new way, the sub-dialog data flow, which is just the active form flow instead of the normal sub-dialog data flow type. I will be using the legacy way for the sub-dialog flow so that we can demonstrate the ability of placing a form within a flow, and then by clicking this button, we'll see that form will be displayed. So I'm just going to edit the flow, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in the accounts type. So I'm going to grab the accounts list that it is already being displayed in that advanced data grid. So make this the account type. Account, put that there. We're going to save this, and then we're going to close this. After we do that, if you haven't already, drag a rule collection filter step. Just rule collection filter is the name of the step. It's a cool step that allows you to pass in a list of items and then choose a rule or create a rule criteria of what data should be removed, filtered out. You can tell it to return the matches and the non-matches, or you can tell it to return the ones that don't match, or you can return the ones that do match. In this case, we're going to return the ones that do match. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this rule. And notice that when I select the data element of this rule, I have the entity. This entity refers to the single iteration of this unfiltered item. So the rule collection filter is going to use this rule against every piece of data within that list that I pass it through. So I don't need to use the account list. I only need to use the entity to determine the criteria of what I'll be filtering by. So in this case, what I want to make sure that I do, which I forgot to do, is that I also pass in that filtered string. So I want to say the filtered string. There we go. Because I need that input to take in from that text box that I type in. And then I'm going to go back to the rule collection filter flow. I'm going to select the filtered string and say if it contains, or the other way, my logic is going to be not the filter string, but if the entity, and I'm going to filter out the email address, so the entity dot email address contains the filtered string. So I'm going to select from flow on this one, grab my filtered string, and then click done. So what this rule is saying is check the email address of every single account in this list and see if the email address of that account contains any of the string text that I will pass in through my filter string. And if it does, then return that value. So I'm going to save this rule. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this out here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my input collection, select from flow, and pass in my account list. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to output that account list at the end. And what I'm going to do with this rule collection filter is I'm going to say, hey, change the output list. I want the output type to be passed into the account list, the change value of it. So I'm going to choose that and say, okay. Now, if you notice that I have an error that's saying, hey, you can't pass in this value, the reason why is because I forgot to check this box to make it a list. So remember to check that box is list. And then when I do that, I can click off and click on. I will have to remap those settings so that decisions will update. Let me check here to make sure that my mapping is good here, and it is. And then I'm going to uncheck this, click off and on, and then I'm going to just select the account list. So list of accounts. So what's happening is taking this list in this rule here, filter it by the filter string, and then output the filter string and change the data of accounts list. So that's what's going to happen. I have a cancel here. I can use that. So what you'll see here is when I configure a form, so I'm going to configure another form, show form here, and I'm going to create a whole new form. This is going to be the updated account list form. I'm going to pass in the advanced data grid, or grab the advanced data grid, put this here, 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 here. And then this one's also going to be of type account. And then we're also going to, this one I'm going to say is the filtered account list. Filtered account list. Configure the report designer here for the advanced data grid. So email address. Created on date. So created on and then created by, save, and then close. And then I'm actually going to make this appear over the entire form. I'm going to grab 2 buttons. This button's going to be update list, and this one's going to be the cancel button. So now it's important to note you don't have to use this cancel option. So I added a cancel just so you can see me use it in this process. But when you're configuring a sub dialog flow and you're using the legacy way in version 7, you don't have to have something connected here. You can leave this blank or leave it unconnected from the path. Just know that if I am updating the list and I'm going to change the data, that if I pass my updated values here, then I'm left my form with no way to just exit. The only ways I'd have to exit would be utilizing the close button, and I'd have to change that button in my form to be the close button, or I'd have to click the X on the top of the form when it's running. So just be aware of that. Okay, so now I'm going to say, hey, we're going to select from flow. Actually, I'm going to have this set back to rename, because if I'm passing into another form, I'll call this updated list. And then I'll make sure that just here, I'm going to pass in the values of the updated list here. And then I'm going to filter the list accounts, select from flow, updated list here. I'll put this here. Perfect. All right. There we go. So now I have my sub dialog flow configured. So now what I have to do is I need to close this, and now I need to provide the inputs for that accounts list. So the accounts list is going to be taken from the data name, form component, and it looks like it hasn't been configured. Accounts, okay. That has been configured. So let me go back into my sub dialog flow. And I'm going to say form control component. And it looks like I can't use the component, so I'm just going to say the input data name, and the input data name here is accounts. So I'm going to say, hey, update accounts. So that's the data name I'm going to be getting the values from. The filtered string, I'm going to use the form component in this case and use filter string. And then for the outputs, I'm going to say, hey, I want you to refresh everything on the form data name of accounts, since that's what my advanced data grid here is utilizing. So I'm going to click OK. And that's going to be my input. So let's test this out and see if it works. So this is a fresh install, so I should have only 3 accounts. Main flow, show form. I'm going to pick the main form, pass this in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my fetch entity step to fetch all my accounts. So results is going to go here. No results, I'm just going to send it to the end. And then I'm going to make sure this is of the account type. Count, pass this in here. Perfect. So now I'm going to debug this, and let's see if it works. All right, let's make sure I passed in entity results to list of accounts. Okay, I'm going to debug this. And let's see if it got passed in. All right, so it looks like on my main form, I think I forgot to configure. That's what it was. I didn't think I configured any of the fields here. So that's a thing to be aware of if you're using the advanced data grid. Make sure that you select the fields you want to display in it, because if you don't, then you'll have that situation that I had there. Let's debug this. Boom, now I have my accounts. And let's say I want to filter this thing out by only the ones by a string that contains by its email address, admin. So then I view my sub dialog, notice that I only have admin pop up here, and then I say I want to update the list. And now when I update the list, notice only this one appears now in my list, because that's what I told it to do. Let's say I want to see if it contains guests or G. So then I'm going to go to the sub dialog. I got no hits, so I'm just going to filter it out. And that's how this flow would work. If I debug again, and let's say I want to grab the guest, sub dialog, it defines the guest account, and then let me update the list, and now it filters out this way. Now, if I run it again, obviously looking for admin, what's going to happen is it's going to pass in this single item list into the sub dialog flow, so it will not grab, it will not check through all the items in the system. I would have to configure that to say, hey, let me make sure that I have a refresh button that says, hey, refresh all the items in this list. So let's go ahead and further our configuration and do that. Let's say I'm going to have another sub dialog button that tells it to refresh so I can get over that. Sub dialog button. This one's going to be filter out account list. And this one's going to say get all accounts. Refresh accounts list. Refresh accounts list. And I'm going to use the legacy way, so I'm going to create a new flow, and I'm going to say this is refresh account list flow. Create. And all it's going to have is it's going to fetch entities. Actually, I don't need to. No, I am going to do this. Yeah, fetch entities. Another thing you'll notice is you can see that I'm treating the sub dialog flow similar to a data flow. So I am not even going to be showing a form here. I am merely just telling it to pass in data. I'm back out when I need it. Could I have also used an event button with an active form flow set to trigger it by? Yeah, I absolutely could. I can do it both ways. So change data here, and then what I'm going to do is for this output, I'm going to say this is account, and this is account, and is list. Put it here, and then I'm going to select the list, and we're going to grab the account list. Or actually, I'm going to call this accounts. That's what I wanted to call it, accounts. Save changes, and I wanted this to be called accounts as well, since I'm fetching a list of accounts. So I'm sure that you're at this part of the video wondering, you could have done this with a data flow. I could have done it with an active form flow. I could have done it, I think there's actually those two ways. I could have done it with an active form flow or this one. And you may be saying, I still don't understand, why would I use a sub dialog flow over an active form flow? The main thing you want to stress when you decide whether you want to use an active form flow or I did not map that correct. If I want to use an active form flow or a sub dialog flow, is you want to ask yourself, do I need a form within a flow? If you do, while on a form. So I'm talking about, do you need a form to display when you click a button while a form is active? So to illustrate that, so when I click my form, I have a flow running, but my form is active. I have a current session running in this form. And if I choose the filter accounts list here, right, I have extended my form experience here. and I have displayed another form to show filtered data. If for some reason I didn't want that, I just wanted to click a button and run something like this, where let's say, let me filter out the list, update the list, and I just want to refresh the list so I have all my options here, then you can use an active form flow, because all I'm doing is I'm populating data into another form control. I am not clicking this button to display a form. That's the difference. Do I want to have a data flow like experience in the form designer to display another form? Then you want a subdialog. If you're just passing data from one form control component to another, then just use an active form flow or a data flow. And that's subdialog flows in a nutshell. It's just, do I want to extend my form experience, or do I not want to extend my form experience? And that's all for today. If you have any further questions, feel free to comment them in the chat. I'll respond to them in the chat and answer those questions. If you have a video request to see another part of decisions, let me know, and I will display, and I will do my best to work on that. If you can, like and comment and subscribe below, and I'll see you guys next time.